live.
Okay. Thanks for joining us today for Master Coaches Wednesday Weekly Buzz and our after show Buzz Reaction. I'm Ruth Nelson, joined by Hall of Famers Mick Haley, Bob Bertucci, and Brian Gimolero, bringing you the most current issues and trends in volleyball. Our weekly news show has leaders in our sport provide their perspective on the questions that are asked, along with the discussions on topics that are current and ones that are affecting all of us. Our news flash. North Carolina AD Cunningham announced this week they will be using one-time partners to implement their NIL legislation. AthleticDirectorU.com recent survey showed an estimated endorsement potential for the #1 athlete, men's basketball, Cole Anthony, $476,000. And at #5, Erica Fontaine, UCLA women's gymnast, at $466,000. Well, after July 1, we will be updating you on how the NIL will be affecting collegiate athletes, their universities, based on their state laws. But to note, 13 of the top 20 on this survey list are women athletes. VNL, Volleyball Nations League, will be discussed today on Buzz Reaction. Want to make a difference? Please remember to renew your AVCA membership. This one organization represents all coaches at all levels when lobbying for the changes that are needed in our sport. And all of you can make a difference by registering at avca.org. Today's guest will be providing us some great insight into what the AAU has accomplished since last year's event that took place in Orlando, Florida. So let's head over to Austin, Texas with Olympic coach, well, should I say former, but you're always an Olympic coach, Mick Haley, who will introduce our guest today. Mick.
Thank you, Ruth. I'm almost got over to Tokyo. Keep working on that. That would be good. We have a special guest today, and it's really exciting for me to be able to introduce Joe Jablonski to you. Joe is with the AAU Sports Development, but he's also been extremely active in the development of the junior game in several parts of the country. Does a number of things now. And Joe, I'm welcome you on, but I'm going to start right out and let you throw a little curveball at John Forman. You've got some information to throw at John that he's not aware of, and I'm going to throw you a ball to start that by saying, give us a little of your background, where you've been, what you've done, so we know a little bit more about you.
Thanks, Mick. Appreciate you guys having me today. Well, John, I grew up in Buffalo, New York, and actually played one season of volleyball at Medaille College back in almost rally scoring days. That's how I feel nowadays about that. It's been so long, but back when the program was really good. Back in the program was just starting, if you will. So we were just scrounging guys up as much as we could to get a team going. So got a little history there with you. There you go.
Tell us more about your background, Joe. Where did you go from Medaille? You got that great volleyball experience there, and then you took off, and you've just been going up ever since.
Yeah, I started coaching volleyball in Buffalo, New York at my old alma mater, Lancaster High School, and ended up being there for about 2 years, and went to Chicago and coached at Sports Performance for about 10 years. It's kind of where I learned the ways of volleyball as far as training and recruiting and all that good stuff. And then spent 10 years here, a little bit over 10 years now, in Dallas, Texas, at a club called TAB, Texas Advantage Volleyball. Had a little stint in Orlando for 2 years at OVA. Had a girlfriend that was there, so I moved to Orlando for a couple of years, and obviously that didn't work. So I'm back in Texas, and we're striving here at TAB as always. So.
What can you tell us about the upcoming AAU championships, and anything you want to point out about the championships, including the difficulty just to get to this point?
Well, we've been fortunate because at AAU, we've been open since the pandemic hit. We actually ran a national tournament last year in July during the pandemic. We had about 400 teams, a lot of precautions, a lot of temperature checks, mask wearing, tons of social distancing, hand sanitizer on galore. But we were able to pull off a successful event, and we were excited about that. And fast forward now, 12 months later, here going into June here in a couple of weeks in Orlando, we'll have over 3,000 teams playing at our national tournament this year, which for us is just amazing, and super excited to be able to say over 3,000 teams. It's a number I didn't expect, I guess, or I don't know if our staff expected it, but we're excited to have that many teams and that many families that come to Orlando and kind of get back to a sense of normalcy, if you will.
Bob Bertucci has just been released to go out and recruit finally. He's been chomping at the bit. Bob, what kind of lead is that for you to ask some questions of Joe?
Well, Mick, I'm glad you mentioned that. If I can get my NCAA test taken, I might actually make it to the AAUs this year. That's my plan. Well, Joe, it's good to see you in a little different role. Now, you said you're back in Texas. Are you working with AAU 100%, or is it both TAV and AAU?
I work for AAU full time, and I'm in our sports development department. So my job is to grow membership and to grow tournaments across the country, or grow events. I obviously focus heavily in volleyball, but I also work with basketball, indoor soccer, which we call futsal, and some other sports as well. But here, full time for AAU remotely. And then I also work with the volleyball club, kind of part owner of a club called Texas Advantage Volleyball. Now we've got about 50 teams here in the Metroplex in a couple different cities. So
well, that's great. You're awful busy, but you got the energy to do it. So that's tremendous. So tell us a little bit about last year. I mean, you were the only event that really came off, the only major event that came off last year. How do you see what you did last year compared to this year, and kind of give us some insights there?
Yeah, last year, obviously, the biggest question was where we're going to be able to do it. We originally had scheduled it for June. The convention center had called us probably early May and said, we can't have it in June. We're not ready to open. Can we move it to July? So we ended up moving the tournament to July. And like I said, we had just under 400 teams, which was great. A lot of local teams, as you can imagine, teams that drove in from Florida and some surrounding areas. And we had a great event. We had, and you guys have all been to the convention center before, where usually it's about 160 courts in there. We only had about 66 courts in there last year. So we had a lot of space between the courts last year, a lot of ball shagging, I guess is the best way to say it. Balls, they hit, some kid went up and hit a pretty good ball. That ball was rolling for a little while. There was no parents to stop it. So, but we were happy to have the event. We were happy that people came and played. It allowed us to follow some protocols that we used the whole summer with our other sports, basketball, track and field, futsal, a lot of other sports that we had hosted over the summertime. We knew what to do. We partnered with Orlando Health. They did our temperature checks and screening of people and patrons coming in. We obviously had the waivers and everything that everybody had to sign, but everybody was just happy to be there. And, wearing a mask, everybody had to keep a mask on. Players did not have to play with a mask, but they were on the sidelines, they had to wear a mask. And we'll follow a lot of the similar guidelines this summer. The temperature check, I think, got passed the other day that we're not going to do temperature checks, but you're still going to have to wear a mask as a spectator, or as if you're on the bench or a coach or things like that. So we're going to follow, obviously, the local guidelines of Orlando and Florida. And we're just excited to get people in there. And when we say 3,000 teams, that number is kind of crazy, but we're back to our normal 160 plus courts in the convention center. We won't be using Disney this summer. Disney is Wide World Sports is not open just yet. So all the play will be at the North and South halls. And we also have the West Hall across the street, across the I-Drive there. So.
Well, that's great. I mean, the biggest thing was you pulled off this major event last year, even though it was smaller. And to my knowledge, it was a healthy event. Everybody got to participate. They left. Nobody, as I heard, had gotten sick. So that's a pretty big deal for AAU to be able to pull that off, I think.
Yeah, we were excited with the ability to be the first major event since the pandemic had hit and shut everything down back in early March. And yeah, knock on wood, I mean, nothing came back to us and said, hey, my kid, caught COVID or whatever the case may be. And, we were excited to be able to pull it off. Obviously, we limited the number of spectators that we had there. We did some things like that to minimize the traffic flow, but we were just happy to be able to provide an avenue for the kids that were able to play, come down and play.
Well, that's great. And I've heard, now that I'm coaching the guys again, I heard that the field is getting bigger and it's actually a pretty good boys event as well as a million girls teams.
Yeah, we're excited. The boys grow every year, actually, to be honest with you. We've been fortunate to keep those guys growing each season. We're excited to have them part of our championship. We're hoping that they outgrow our girls championship, and we got to do something different and get their own little event going. That's kind of our goal. We actually have a men's professional league coming into play this summer. Lloyd Ball and some of those guys with their group, they're going to bring 5-6 teams down, and they're going to have their final championship there in Orlando during the boys' time as well. So we'll add a little spin to the boys' event and let them see what the future might have for some of those guys.
Wow, great. Well, I'm going to kick it over to Brian because I'm sure he's got a couple of questions for you as well.
Thanks, Bob.
Joe, I'm really impressed with this number, and I can't do a 4-team tournament, let alone 3,000 teams. So let's talk about future. What now that we're coming back, and what do you see? What's some things we can look forward to? What changes do you see being made? Where's the future of junior volleyball?
That's a good question. That might be
I want
a
a crystal
question.
ball. I'm asking you the crystal ball question.
If I had that answer, I might be doing something else besides coaching volleyball right now. So, I think, Brian, the most important thing that I keep hearing from everybody, and this is from players and parents and other coaches and even collegiate coaches, they just want to be in the gym and they want to see each other again. We've been fortunate here in Texas. We've been able to play all season. We started playing in January and we haven't missed a tournament yet. And we've been fortunate. We traveled across the country a couple times as well. There's precautions in every city that are a little bit different. Some masks, some don't have to wear masks when you're playing, stuff like that. But I think the opportunity to play for the kids this year was great. The biggest proponent that everybody was missing was the recruiting side of it. And the college coaches having to recruit from a TV screen and things like that. And every college coach I've talked to, and I've been on a couple committee calls now, they just want to see the kids' personality. They want to see how they react to good plays and bad plays and how they react to coaches coaching them and what happens during the timeout and all that stuff, or mom and dad running water bottles over to them and everything like that. So I think the future, to be honest with you, is try to get back to just that sense of I can walk in the gym and I can see balls flying all across the convention center hall, and I'll be able to see somebody maybe I haven't seen in almost a year now.
What about the way the format of tournaments, or how are clubs changing? Is the completely different? Are clubs changing the way they see they kind of come up with new things, or are people just excited to come back? Or and in terms of tournaments, is the format going to be different? Is there any speculation about that?
Yeah, this year I think it was a combination of everything. Everybody was happy to be able to play and be back. There was a lot of different formats used, 14 pools that were played over 2 courts. So you basically played your 3 matches over 3 hours. You're in and out of the gym in 3.5 hours, which was pretty nice. And it was something different. Parents liked it because if you played in the morning at 8 o'clock, you're out of there by 10:30 and you had the whole day to yourself. I think some of the kids, I think it's good for the young kids, to be honest with you, Brian, because they have that. But the older kids, when you start getting into that high school age, 15, 16, 17, especially our 18s, playing 3 matches in 3 hours at a high level is really hard to do, as you guys can imagine. I would assume that next year things are probably pretty close to being back to normal. Most events that we played in this year that were national qualifiers or national type events, they were normal 4-team pools or 3-team pools, playing 3 sets of 25. We did a lot of the things that we had normally done, but I can't see that anybody would try to change it and go to that, what we call COVID format, if you will. Here in Texas, we use that for a lot of our local events here in the North Texas region, where we played 3 matches in 3 hours. But it was hard for the older kids. There wasn't enough break time, to be honest with you, or what I would call semi-recovery time.
Yeah. What about, I listened to you talking about implementing regulations on such a big tournament. Here in California, the 15th, June 15th, there's going to be several changes about that, what people have to do publicly. But you talked about having to wear masks. What kind of enforcement do you have there?
Yeah, we've kind of gone back and forth with this a little bit, obviously, because every city and every state, like you had said, is changing. Here in Texas, we don't have to wear masks. I went, to the grocery store last night to pick up some stuff for dinner, and I didn't have my mask on because I got my vaccination back in February, so I was good. But you still get that weird look kind of thing from people, And I think for volleyball, our message to everybody is we're happy to have the kids playing, and we want to get through the tournament, and we want to keep the tournament as safe as possible. And that's kind of how we're going to approach the mask policy. We've been to some events where there's been parents that don't want to wear masks. They don't feel like they need to because whether it's a belief or their city and state doesn't mandate them to. But we think with an event of this size, people were hoping to understand that we just want the kids to play volleyball, and we're going to do everything we can to make that happen. So.
Well, that was a good political answer. I was really impressed. That sounded
I've done
like
this. I had to do that once or twice before. So
yeah, it sounded like a coach. That was pretty good. Well, I'm really impressed with all that you're doing, and the golden goose for volleyball has been high school, and then the club volleyball. Club volleyball for girls is just an amazing thing, and I'm hoping it keeps growing, and I hope that you don't tire on us. You can keep going. And there's a lot of recruiting questions, and I'm turning it over to Ruth for that.
Great.
Okay.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks.
All right, Joe, you are being very modest about just saying you happen to work for a club that has 50 teams. You happen to be working for one of the premier clubs in the country, Texas Advantage. And I'm interested as a recruiter for a large organization like that. How do you feel that you've been able to implement the new, player ID camps? And I see you guys are running camps this summer, college camps, so you're back to that. How is it that some of these college coaches can't do camps on their campus? So this is an advantage for junior clubs, right? More so than ever.
Yeah, we've been fortunate for the last almost 15 years plus. We've run a college camp in June, and we're always right around 20 to 22 college coaches that come in and train the kids over 2 or 3 days. This year we're doing 2 days, and we have about 23 college coaches coming. We're excited about it. We're excited to have them back in the gym with the kids. Obviously, it'll be the first opportunity that they've seen the kids because, as you guys know, they really can't be off campus till June 4th. So we're running our camp next week, Wednesday and Thursday. So we're excited to have those guys in the gym. And it's an opportunity for the kids to be in their environment, in their home gym, with college coaches there coaching them, which, is kind of a full circle. They've been playing and practicing all year with no college coaches around. And now these college coaches are going to be in their gym training them. So we're pretty excited to see how the reaction comes. We got over 260 kids registered for the camp. We're excited about it. And we think it's going to be a good time as always.
Okay, so you have 50 teams, let's just say an average of 10 players. That's how in the world did you do the recruiting during COVID for over 500 kids?
Well, I don't really spend much recruiting time with our kids until their late freshman year or their sophomores, to be honest with you. I've kind of slowed the recruiting down for our club. For the last 8 years, I had coached our 14 and under team. So the parents they had access to me obviously pretty readily. And I always just would push recruiting off for those guys. Because to me, if you're a good volleyball player, and I might have got this from Mick Haley a long time ago, is if you're a good volleyball player, the coaches are going to find you. You know, and I think training at 14s and 15s especially is super important for the kids. So we kind of slowed down the recruiting for those age groups and just kind of told the parents, we're not going to have conversations. I'm not going to have meetings. I did a lot of Zoom meetings for our class of 22s during the pandemic last year with mom and dad and the daughter, just to kind of bear through the waters. It's an uncharted territory. It still is, to be honest with you. The 22s, I think, are the most affected class by this for sure, because last year, which was 16's year for them, which is a big recruiting year for them to be seen live, coaches didn't get to see those kids, and they didn't get to see them all this year. So we have a handful of kids still in our 22 class that we're been sending out lots of game footage and videos and communicating with college coaches on their behalf. But to be honest, Ruth, it hasn't been easy. It's something that none of us are prepared for.
So you as a club, do you spend, how much, are you doing much live streaming for college coaches? Or do you just, the parents do that stuff?
Yeah, the parents live stream all the matches and video cut it up, and then they put it on a private YouTube channel. We use a recruiting platform that allows the kids to upload videos and things like that as well, which has been very good for our players. And a lot of players, to be honest, they're way more tech savvy than I am. You know, they create their own YouTube private channels and put their links and videos up there and upload them and edit them and do all that stuff. So our kids have been really proactive this year. And to be honest, I'm on the approach. I really think recruiting is a player guided system. It's not Joe Jablonski calling 10 schools for every kid, because I can do that, but at the end of the day, the coaches still need to know that you want to come to school there, and they want to know who you are. They don't want to know who Joe Jablonski is. So
yeah, so there's two things. One, the player portal. So do you feel that you possibly are the gatekeeper when you've got a player that says, hey, I want to transfer? Do you feel stuck in that situation so many of these times, especially now? Yeah,
you know, the portal has made life very interesting for all sports, to be honest with you. I don't know that I'm over a big fan. I think it's too easy for kids to transfer nowadays. But if we do have a kid that calls and says, I'm not happy, we kind of go through this process with them of the reasons why and what they're looking for. We won't help a kid with recruiting unless they are in the portal. I know that there's some kids that want to kind of test the waters before they put their name in the portal. We don't play that game. We're straight up, and we want to be as honest as we can. So if you're going to transfer, then you need to make yourself readily available in the portable, and then we'll help and make some phone calls. But to be honest, we really focus heavily on the kids that we currently have, and the kids that are in the portal, we help out as much as we can, but we have to help out the current kids that we have a little bit more.
Okay, so because of COVID and the way high school overlapped so much with club throughout the country, not just Texas, when you said you got back to January, hey, I remember May 8th during COVID, people were still in the gym here in Texas. I don't know where anywhere else, but how are you going to solve that, where kids potentially may have to decide, am I going to play club or am I going to play high school?
Yeah, you know, I was in Chicago, obviously, for 10 years, and I have a lot of friends in Chicago, and they had their high school season in the spring. So I talked to a lot of club coaches that were trying to figure out how to navigate through those waters, because some of the high school coaches wouldn't let their kids play club volleyball at the same time. I don't know what the right answer is to be, and I told this to everybody that I had talked about this. There isn't a right answer. It's a decision that the kids are going to have to make. The families are going to have to make to what's most important to them and what's most beneficial. I love high school volleyball. I think it gives the kids an opportunity to be showcased at their school. It gets us a separation as club coaches and directors to be away from them and let them kind of breathe a little bit. But I think club volleyball is really an avenue and a window that the kids need to get to the next level.
Okay, that sounds great. Okay, now Mick is sending chats to me like crazy. I've got a question. I got a question. So when Brian and Bob start using the chat, then they get to ask more questions. So Mick, you're on.
Well, it wasn't a stutter. I only sent one of those questions, but I have an interesting question. So John Forman reported in his blog this last week about the ability to run 4 team pools over 2 courts, Joe, and he was saying that might be something of the future. And certainly you detailed all of that very well, and appreciate that because it gives you good thought about maybe some things work for some ages better than other ages, et cetera, et cetera. But I wonder what we learned from the parents officiating, calling the lines, and doing all of that. Did we have parents yelling at parents, or now that they had to do the officiating? I'm interested in the whole scope of this, because, you know, one of the things we learned last week from our officials group that we had on is that young kids don't want to go out there and start officiating because they get taunted many times early before they get their wings, so to speak, and they don't want that abuse. And I'm wondering if what happened with the parents doing the scorekeeping and all of that. Did coaches yell at the parents when they didn't get the subs right and all of that? Do you have any feedback on that?
Yeah, you know, it definitely, I think, opened a lot of parents' eyes. You know, you always look for those volunteers that want to do the lines or the book, as you call it. And there aren't a lot of volunteers at that time. And you almost got to make up a parent worksheet and make sure that everybody's doing their duties. But yeah, the parents, they were on top of parents at some times. And it was interesting because some officials, when we played in events, had parents be on the opposite side of the court as their team. Yeah. And sometimes they didn't. And we had an instance where we had one of our middles, she went on a 10-point plus serving run, and her dad was doing the line and made a touch call on her making the defensive move that she didn't touch, and she turned and yelled at him. So it was kind of comical, to be honest with you. And she said, "I can't believe that you did that, Dad, when I was serving and made that bogus call," kind of thing. So, you know, it's one of those things, Mick, to be honest with you. I think the parents realize that it's not as easy as it looks. We had a lot of our dads did most of the line judging this year, and they said the ball is so fast, we can't see the touch calls. It happens so quick, we can't tell.
It's much easier from the stands.
Yeah, if you're in the stands,
yeah,
it's quicker.
The angle is much different from those chairs on the sidelines over there. So I think we had a lot of parents kind of, I would call it, tone it down a little bit and say, you know, those kids, like you said, Mick, that are whatever, 12, 13, 14 years old, that are still kind of learning the game for most of those guys, they're trying to do the same job, and they're 20 plus years older and they can't do a better job. So we had a lot of parents that accepted the role and also realized that I'm going to chime my way down a little bit here as we get into a normal tournament setting.
I always remembered in not little league, but high school baseball, an base umpire did not show up. They called my dad out of the stands to call umpire first and second, do the bases. And he got the call right every time because he would yell either out or safe, but he would give just the opposite signal. And if you couldn't hear him, then you would think he was calling something else. It embarrassed me to death, and all he wanted to do is hide under the base. He got the call right, just couldn't get the hand signal to go with the call. So I hope the parents realize that it's a much more difficult thing to be making those calls out there, and they take it to heart a little bit when they have other people like the players out there doing that.
Well, I can tell you this, Mick, when we got back to normal play and we had a normal work team and an official, we still had the double call being yelled at from the stands all the time. And they didn't realize that they went back to a normal parent at that time then. So.
Okay, guys, we're out of time. And Joe, it's great to have you on. And we wish you the best of luck. And we are on to our next part of the show. Book your Master Coaches custom in-person or virtual clinic today by heading over to Instagram. You still can register for our one-day coaches clinic in Abilene, Texas June 5th by registering at AbileneYSA.org. That is Abilene Youth Sports Authority. Missed one of our shows? Jump over to Instagram and click on our YouTube channel link. Follow us on Facebook, Volleyball Master Coaches, Instagram, Twitter, VB Master Coaches. A special shout out to our partners, Baden Sports and SNA Sports. And thanks to our content providers, NFHS, JVA, Coaches Insider, and AVCA. Stay on Facebook Live after John closes our show today, as Dr. Forman will be our guest talking about, guess what? Our Nations League in Italy. Now, let's go to our Buzz and Buzz Reaction digital partner now that he's back in his chair, Dr. John, who will update us on his most recent interviews during his vacation time. So come off the beach, John.
Oh, no way. Going out for a bay cruise, a sunset cruise this evening. Come on. Can't do that. Actually, I was just got up to close the window because somebody was starting to do their lawn. So didn't need that in the show. But I'm happy to let's get rolling into VNL. It's started, so that's a good thing.
All right. No conversations, no beach tan, no sunshine.
Getting a bit of tan. A little bit. You know, a long way to go before I reach Brian Gimolaro levels of tan.
All right. Let's head off to Buzz Reaction.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Joe.
Go Mavs.
For those joining us for Buzz Reaction for the first time, today we will be getting an update from Dr. John Forman and all the details about the men's and women's VNL competition being held in Italy. John presently is the head men's and women's volleyball coach at Medaille College and an author of the Coaching Conversations podcast and also co-author of the Coaching Wizard book series and many other things. Welcome, John, and let's jump in. And Master Coaches has a ton of questions for you. And we're heading to Mick first.
All right. No guarantees I have answers to all of them, but Mick needs to turn on his microphone.
Well, give us the rankings. That's what I want to know about.
Sorry, John. I have been watching your blog, and you've been one of the guys out there that have been most consistent to report on the Nations League's games. And a lot of people don't know really what the Nations League is now. It's kind of morphed together under one name for both men and women. Can you explain exactly, first of all, what the Nations League is and why it's called VNL?
Okay, so it used to be, as you kind of said, there used to be the Grand Prix, the World Grand Prix for women and the World League for men. And they were similar competitions that ran in parallel every year. FIVB a couple of years ago, I think 3 years ago now, decided they wanted to rebrand it all and put them together into, I don't know why they decided Volleyball Nations League, but I guess it's appropriate because it is kind of a league and there's prize money and all that sort of stuff that's involved. So the way it works now, obviously they've got some adjustments going on into the format this year, but generally speaking, it's a 16-team format on both sides, where in the first phase, it's a round robin, a full round robin. So each team over the course of 5 weeks plays 15 matches, 3 matches per week. Normally, the women would play Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then the men would play Friday, Saturday, Sunday. This year, it's just rolling. So every 3 days they switch. So last week on Tuesday, the women played their 3 days. The men started right up on Friday, played through until Sunday. The women came back on Monday. So today is the 3rd day of this most recent cycle. The guys will be onto their second wave tomorrow. So they don't have 4 days off like they would normally would, but they're also in a bubble, so they don't have a travel issue to be involved with. So they're running it a little bit more concisely and quickly this time around. Also, adjustment that they've made is normally the top 3 teams, the top 6 teams from the round robin phase go on and get split out into 2 pools of 3. They play, a round robin in that, and then the winners go on and play for the championship. This year, it's only the top 4 that are going, and it's going to go straight knockout.
So I understand though that winning 3-0 is an advantage over winning 3-2, the way they're giving points. Can you
Yeah.
explain that for everybody?
Yeah, it's similar to a format that you see in a lot of professional leagues these days, and you also see in the Olympics, where if you win 3-0 or 3-1, you get 3 points. If you win in 5, you get 2 points. If you lose in 5, you get 1, and otherwise you get 0.
And you feel that's a fair system? You do a lot of statistical analysis of all these things. Is that actually a fair system, or are there some flaws there?
I think it's relatively fair. You have to look at exactly how they do the tiebreakers. And I remember maybe it was the 2016 Olympics. Paul Sunderland was moaning about the point system the whole tournament. It should just be wins. It should just be wins. I don't know if he just never looked and realized that the first tiebreak, the first criteria was wins. So that the point system was actually a tiebreak, not the first criteria to decide place. I haven't looked specifically for VNL to see if that's the case here. But I think for the most part, when I've done these analysis on leagues and stuff before, the top and bottom tend to end up being exactly where they are. There might be a little bit of shuffling in the middle where the teams are a little bit closer together, but generally it's not too far off.
Okay. Ruth, I have one question left at the end after everybody else asks their questions, if we have time. So I'll pass the baton.
Okay.
All right. Well, John, tell us the rankings right now for the men and the women.
All right. Well, like I said, the men have only played 3, so their rankings are a little bit, in their infancy, shall we say.
Okay.
So we've got for the men, I'm just bringing it around. Brazil is up top, 9 points. France is second on 8. Japan and Russia both have 7. Poland's on 6 in the top 5. The US is sitting kind of in a joint, there's like a 5-way tie with 6 points. So, but when you filter out the tie breaks, they're actually falling into number 8. In their case, they had a loss against Brazil, which unfortunately, I didn't get to see the match, and I haven't been able to see the replay, but it sounded like they didn't have a particularly good match. But they beat Canada, and I'm blanking on who was the other team to beat. Serbia. No, that was the women. Never mind. Argentina. They beat Argentina in 4 the other day after dropping the first set. So this week is going to be interesting for them because they have to play Russia, who's defending champions. They have to play Poland, who I think right now is like number 2 ranked in the world. Yeah, number 2 behind Brazil, Brazil being number 1. And they have to play Australia, who you would normally expect them to beat. So that this week will probably get an indication of where they really stand. If we want to flip over to the women's side, they're finishing up round 2 right now. So most of the teams have played 6. I think there's a couple matches finishing up as we speak. The U.S. women look fantastic. They dropped 1 set, but that's it. And they've been winning decisively against some pretty decent teams altogether. They beat Dominican and Canada 3-0. They beat Brazil 3-1. Serbia 3-0 this week. Netherlands yesterday. Thailand this morning. They cruised past. They don't have a lot coming up. Italy next week could be interesting, and they'll still have Japan, Turkey, Poland, and China down the line that they're going to have to play later on in the tournament, which will probably be the teams that they really need to score against to get into the top 4.
What's the difference between the core teams and the challenge teams? Can you explain that a little bit?
I believe that there are certain countries that automatically are guaranteed a spot, probably based on the history that they have in the sport. Other teams, there are secondary competitions below VNL through which teams can work their way into VNL. And so like the teams that Ruth has on the screen here, Belgium, Bulgaria, Dominican Republic, Poland, are essentially trying to work their way up into being consistently in VNL. It's kind of a promotion relegation scheme that they've got at work. it helps keep a good high representation in the league from year to year.
So if one team moves up, does another team have to move down? Like the
Yeah.
bottom team drops down and top team of the
Yes.
challenge group moves up?
Yeah, something along those. Well, in this case, what will happen is if the challenge teams don't perform well, they could drop back down. So that the 12 teams at the top are, I believe, as I understand it, are safe from relegation, or primarily safe from relegation. It's the 4 teams in the challenge that are at risk of falling back down if they don't perform well. But I'm not 100% expert on that.
Okay. And what's coming up with the league right now?
So, like I said, the women have just finished round 2 of 5. The men start tomorrow, round 2 of their 5. So we've got, I guess it puts it probably about 2.5 more weeks in the round robin, just about that, 2 to 2.5 more weeks before they, we'll shift into that knockout stage.
Now, will this affect the seeding going into the Olympics?
Yeah, actually, I was looking at that this morning, and FIVB has done something new this year. They've changed their ranking system, and all of these matches in VNL in semi-real time influence the world rankings. So, for example, Japan on the women's side, Japan beat China recently, and they made a big jump up to, I think, from number 7 to number 4 as a result of that. So it's kind of like, I guess you could kind of relate it a little bit to RPI, but it's more like the Pablo rankings that Rich Kern has, where your results against other teams will impact where your rankings are. And it's kind of built on that same, this is what we would think if these 2 teams play against each other based on these rankings, we think the odds are that this team would win or that team would win. So that's why with each result, they can update these things, unlike, in years gone by, where they would only update them after major tournaments.
So Brian, this is a lot different than when you were involved with the national program. You must have some thoughts about it.
Well, it's interesting because of COVID, how little competition has been going on. So how many more tournaments are there before the Olympics, or are there any?
There actually, there's another tournament going on lower level in Europe for teams that aren't in VNL. There's usually other tournaments below the VNL level that are happening roughly at the same time. So that stuff is happening. I know Europe went through Euro qualifications.
Did they?
Earlier, I think earlier in May. So that's been happening. I haven't looked at the FIVB calendar to see, or the CEV calendar to see, because I think the Euros would be next year if I'm right in terms of the planning. But the Olympics are earlier this year, so there's less room to squeeze some stuff in.
How many teams have qualified? Do we have the U.S. qualified in both women and men?
Yeah, they qualified, I think, back in 2019. I think they had already both booked their spots.
Wow.
They kind of keep changing how they do that
In
qualification.
Shreveport, they did. In Shreveport qualified.
Yeah.
And then how many teams are left, spots are left? Do we know?
Not off the top, but let me pull it up and see.
Yeah, just
What's
the
going on?
general public, we just, really aren't very aware that teams must qualify from regions to be able to participate in the Olympics. So,
Right.
and there's some, last minute spots. Given this, I didn't know how it was going to work.
Yeah, I mean, the host team always qualifies, and I
Right.
believe the defending champion is
Yeah.
an automatic qualifier.
Yeah.
So that being the case, all right, so let's look at right now. So so that's Japan on the men's side. Japan and Brazil are the 2 automatics.
Right.
USA, Italy, Poland, Russia, Argentina, France, Iran, Tunisia, Venezuela, and Canada. So
So it's all done.
Yeah, they've all qualified.
It's all done. So that's all 12.
Yeah. And then on the women's side, Japan, Serbia, China, US, Brazil, Russia, again, Italy, Kenya from African
Africa.
qualification. Argentina, South Korea, Turkey, Dominican Republic.
So given that, what's going on in this tournament just is kind of a seeding tournament, but there's also potentially some games being played to see, maybe you're not showing your best lineups, maybe you're experimenting, you know.
Right. It's always interesting to watch how these teams, especially the better teams who've got the deeper rosters, the USA's, Brazil's, Poland to a degree, Russia, China, who do they bring? Who do they play and get meaningful time? I think there was a year where Lang Payne didn't even coach the VNL. Like her assistant coach took the team in the VNL, but she coached them later in world championships or something like that. So, you know, obviously different countries have different priorities for VNL in terms of what they want to get done. You know, there's also the question of who just came off of a long European season. Like I think the players who just were in the Champions League final, not a lot of them have played in the early rounds, so they can get a little bit of extra rest.
Well, John, as volleyball fans, can you tell the public how do we view these games? How do you take a look? It's not going to be on ESPN. We know that. So
Yeah, wishful thinking.
Yeah.
So FIVB is running a streaming site called volleyballworld.tv. And it's a subscription service, and they offered it the whole VNL package all together, all the matches was $19.99, and they were having discount codes where you could get it for $14.99 or $15.99, which is pretty reasonable given the amount of volleyball content out there. I think they might have sold rights in other places to broadcast networks to be able to do it. It doesn't seem like they've done it in the US. For example, I think Flow in prior years has had some of the rights, and maybe NBC Universal has had the rights to maybe weekend matches or something along those lines. But it doesn't look like in the US at least it's going that way this year.
So we can subscribe if we want to watch.
Yeah.
And the last question I have before I turn it over to Ruth is the Olympics going to happen? Come on, John.
I mean, it feels like it is, but I'm not in the middle of that. So
does the
who knows?
volleyball world kind of really talking about the Olympics? Is it
I don't know if there's a lot of buzz about it just yet, but there does seem to be a vibe that, okay, this is an Olympic year.
Yeah.
We're tuning up to have Olympics until we get some sort of news otherwise.
Yeah. Okay, Ruth, it's all up to you, except for Mick with that last great question.
I didn't realize that I like this idea to pass the baton, you know, and he's got that passing thing. He wants to pass it instead of chat it. But John, I was thinking about, you know, the picture that you see here, it is so different than other competitions. And, you know, to me, can you kind of go through some of those aspects? Because a lot of people who don't see a lot of international matches, well, this is actually, there's very little advertising on this court. Usually you can't even see the lines on the court when you watch the international matches. But I thought you might like to explain a little bit of that.
Yeah, one of the issues you always have with international tournaments is that if the host team isn't playing, the stands are empty. Okay, maybe Japan, you get a little bit more interest, but so the atmosphere in the arena is not great unless the host team is playing. I find it really interesting that we can see in this picture that they've got this border around the court, and it's a little bit like what Athletes Unlimited did, because obviously they didn't have spectators for most of their event either, but it wasn't as sophisticated as what we've got here. And it does make me wonder what it's like to actually be in there playing in that environment compared to playing in the normal situation where you're in a wide open arena. I mean, I think it looks attractive.
Well, you know what? When people pay money, you've got to figure out how to get them up on the walls and reflecting every 30 seconds and rotating all the way down with all the advertisements. But do you see, since you've spent more time in Europe than you have here, I mean, you're spending more time now, but you've spent an awful lot of time overseas. Do you see the sponsorship of the way it does in Europe ever start to affect all the way down to juniors? Because you don't really see that, only on their uniforms, but you never really see that on courts.
Right. Yeah. I mean, in Europe, volleyball is often very community oriented,
Mhm.
to the extent that you go to some place like where I was in Sweden, the local, what we would call a town council, was a major sponsor of the volleyball club. They provided the court space. There were certain restrictions that had to be met in terms of how many players were above a certain age and things like that, because clearly the orientation was toward younger people.
Mhm.
But it's very different than what we've got here in the States, where clubs are primarily private organizations.
Uh-huh.
So there's less of a commercial incentive over there than there is on our side. I mean, I think from a business perspective, we do have to be looking at ways of, well, how do you make this stuff sustainable in case of the inevitable politics that come into play, that, okay, one day the town council decides we're not going to support sports anymore. And so that money disappears. What are those clubs going to do? And it's not just volleyball, it's a bunch of different sports that have to deal with that.
Well, the last thing I would ask, and then I'm going to let Mick, he has something he wanted to talk about. But one of the things I was going to say is it's interesting of how much more relaxed the announcers are in this particular league and this social media, and the players doing all the TikTok, all the organizations, all the countries are now so much more social media than just a year ago. And I don't know if they've had time to plan and record all this stuff during COVID, but it's all over. And you're talking about hundreds of thousands of viewers on a lot of this. I mean, you look at Avi Tal's handstand, that's 740,000 views on him falling and standing up on his hands. But, it's really changed the concept. But Mick, I know you want to say something before we close out today.
Well, I just had John, I was trying to get John's perspective, and this is a hard question, John, so you might not be able to ask it, but you pointed out to us before the show started how the U.S. team is using 3 different setters so far. They've rotated their lineup significantly. I think they have, I could be wrong on this, but their roster may be 18 and it actually may be 21 for this event. And they seem to be rotating their players around and still winning at a high level. What other things have you witnessed that might be new things coming out in the sport? Coaches are always trying to figure out new ways to do things, and these tournaments are where you spot those, because they try these things out in these tournaments. They really try to see if they can get a better usage of the rules, or how they use their players, or how they use the challenge system. There's always something. Have you picked up on anything so far that you want to let our viewers know about so they can look for it as they watch these matches?
Actually, I'll make a recommendation that people go to Mark Lebedou's website, marklebedeau.com, because he's actually doing broadcasting right now. So he's over in the bubble and you can hear him commentating on the matches. He actually posted, I believe it was yesterday, about some implications of how the challenge structure is set up, and how coaches can use it and how they can't use it, and some confusion that falls in, because we've had this conversation just recently.
Sure.
Last week about, challenge system in the NCAA and how it could be better, and looking at what happens at the VNL level and the international level, where in VNL, they're not even using line judges at this point. If it's tight call, somebody's going to challenge it and they go to the Hawkeye, which is very fast. So for them, it's an easy thing. They could get an answer in 30 seconds. But Mark makes some really interesting points about if you challenge a certain thing. For example, I think he mentioned net touches. Anything that the official can see in the replay is subject to being called, even if it doesn't have anything to do with what you're challenging on. So, if you could be challenging for the net touch, but somebody's reaching over the net. and obstructing play on the other side, that could get called. I mean, it can't be, I don't think you can challenge explicitly on that, but you can get around to challenging it by triggering a challenge related to something else. You just have to be aware of what happens when you challenge something and what they do with the camera angles. So Mark's point, I believe it was with having to do with net violation, was if you challenge that, then they're going to narrow the camera angle so that you're just looking at the net. So you're not going to see things that are above it or too much below it. So you might miss that reach over call or something else that might have happened in the play. Whereas if you maybe challenge something different that's within the scope of the camera that they would use to evaluate that, you could get the call. So there's some strategy involved in using the challenges in a way that actually gets the calls made that you want to get called.
Well, that's the reason I asked the question, because every time they make a rule change or put something in, it hardly ever goes the way they figured it would go, because the coaches try to figure out how they can use this to be more successful. And there are some smart people out there that do a lot of research that pay attention to this. And it's pretty exciting to watch this and see who figures what out first and who tries what first. And I wanted to point out one last thing, that the world famous Brazilian coach Bernardino, who coached the women in 2000 to a third place finish, then coached the men in Brazil, is the new coach of the French men's team. They are performing really high. And if you follow international volleyball and coaches, you want to watch France right now, because Bernardino does not go into a gym without thinking he's going to win. And every player that comes into that gym eventually feels like they're going to win. He's a great coach. You want to pay attention to that. So I would just throw that out there as a statement. Ruth, how are we doing on time here?
I think what I would like to do is this is our last session before we head for Abilene. And I'd love to get a comment from Mick, you, Brian, and Bob on us rendezvousing in Abilene, Texas on Friday. So Brian, let's go with you first.
Well, I look forward to seeing you guys, by the way, but also I think this is going to be a great clinic. We know it'll be a great clinic, and I love the idea of spreading our knowledge to the Abilene area.
All right. Boy, that's the quickest ever. All right. Bob.
Well, I'm excited about it as well. You know, to get together again with a long time before we've been in person with each other. But I'm also excited about the number of people. I mean, the numbers keep ticking up, so we're going to have a good group of people there. But it still, still has the opportunity to get that, up and close and personal touch to it, and I don't want us to lose that. But I think it's going to be a very well attended event.
All right, and Mick?
Yeah, I think the advantage that I've always enjoyed is going in the night before. We do the programming part where we work with the players, and coaches can come in and watch and just see how we're teaching the players to get ready for the sessions the next day. And then we get to spend some time after that. We have a little social hour after that back at the hotel. You get to meet a lot of the people that are going to be at the clinic because they come in the night before. It's not a short drive for some of them out there. So coming in the night before is important. And really, you always learn something. I always feel like the more people I get a chance to have a conversation with, the more I pick up things that can either make the presentation better, or I find out more about volleyball, or I learn something about the area and the people. So it's pretty special when we can get back to this. And it's been a long time since I've been in the gym. So it's
And Mick, you left out that the host is buying the drinks.
Oh, I did leave that.
Yeah, that was the most important thing. How could you forget that?
My wife will post a picture of that too.
Oh yeah, we do know that. All right, well, our time is up, and thanks for joining us today for our Buzz Reaction. We thank our guests for providing great insight in both the AAU vision for tomorrow and the VNL updates from Italy, but on John in vacation. For those coaches that are interested in our consulting services, please email from our link on our VB Master Coaches Instagram. Be sure to tell your friends about our weekly show. Thanks for joining us today, and see you next week on The Buzz.
Thanks, John.
We look forward to seeing you this weekend in Abilene, Texas for the June 4th and 5th Master Coaches Championship Skills Series Clinic. And if you aren't registered, there are still a few spots left. Go to www.abileneysa.org.